Scot Hodkiewicz was living the American dream, picture-perfect family, a great job, and things were looking good. Then a tragedy struck, and he tells his story of tragedy to victory in the book Going Through Hell to Get to Heaven. Thank you, Scot, for being here today. And I just know that our friends and family are going to love your story. So you had this amazing plan for your life. And it all seemed, and we all do, we have these plans. We go through school and college and family and kids, and we have all these things lined up for this great life. And you had the same thing.
Yeah, I had a great plan for how my life was going to go, and was kind of following it step by step. We had I'd married a wonderful another veterinarian, Mona, right out of vet school. We had 3 young kids that were beautiful, had the ideal life, and we had worked the last 8 years to build our veterinary practice up, and it had just started to kind of turn the corner and make some money, and we were enjoying the fruits of that. I thought we had a great plan. I thought I knew exactly how life was going to go. And as I sometimes say, if you want to hear God laugh, just tell him your plan. And I think he was chuckling when I was telling him what a great plan I had. That plan changed, and it changed very quickly and very unexpectedly for us.
So tell us what happened that day. It was a normal day. Your family is all in the car. Right. And where are you going?
You know, we had bought a place up in northern Wisconsin, which is what a lot of people do in Wisconsin. And we had spent the weekend up at our cabin, beautiful weekend, and we're heading home. So I had my wife, 3 kids, myself, and 2 dogs all in the minivan, typical American family. And an 8-time drunk driver comes across the median, hits us head on. So we're both on the interstate. He's going 70 miles an hour one direction, I'm going 70 miles an hour the other, and we collide head on. That's usually unsurvivable. We were very beat up, very injured. I took the brunt of it. You can see from the picture that we hit corner to corner. So I took the brunt of it, though. My wife was injured also, major concussion, 3 spinal fractures, broken elbow, internal bleeding. My kids were beat up and broken. The dogs were beat up and broken. I ended up having about 9 different fractures. And after 11 hours of surgery that day, they gave me a 1 in 100 chance of living. Wow. 1 in 100. Wow. And I was the one that survived. But it was that close.
Wow. I mean, you tell in your book, and I was just captivated as I was reading the story about the surgeon, one of the best trauma surgeons around, and it opens up your stomach and blood is just pouring everywhere. You had so much internal bleeding, and just thank God for those that rush in the pain and the hurt. They're like angels, unaware, sent to help us, but you did survive.
Well, and I talk a lot about the angels that came to help us. You know, I wasn't very spiritual coming into this. I went to church on occasion. I kind of had drifted away from the church. We were starting to go back to it because we had kids and we wanted them to have some church experience, but I really wasn't a believer. And I really didn't recognize the angels in my life until that crash. And it was amazing, the people that came in. And when I talk about angels, I don't talk about the halo and the wings. I didn't need that at the crash. What I needed was, instead of the halo, I needed the fireman in his hard hat, and I needed the jaws of life that he had in his hand that got me out of this horrific car crash. You can see in the picture, they're using the jaws of life right now to get me out. That was my angel. And if you look around, these are all angels that came to help us. Wow. You mentioned the surgeon that put me back together, Dr. Jerry Lang. He's one of the best in the country. He wasn't actually supposed to be there that day. He was supposed to have that day off. He was supposed to be done at noon. We came in at 1. He stayed there to help out and was with me the 11 hours of surgery. If he hadn't been there that day, I don't think I could have survived this. I think it was purely God's work to put him there that day. He had actually switched. He was supposed to work on Saturday. He was coaching his son's football team, and it was the last week, so he switched and was on Sunday. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been there.
I mean, it's surreal hearing you tell your story and reading it. It's like you should have been in heaven. And you're here. And so
Right.
there's a reason you're here. And there's an important, your story is important to tell. And so I love that we get to take that time and tell this story. You went through pain to recover, to come through. Can you share about that a little bit?
Well, and I think the process was kind of breaking me back down to where I needed to be. I was kind of arrogant. I'd been successful at everything I had really put my heart and mind to, and thought that was just the way I was. I was going to be successful. And God kind of had to break me back down again and say, look, this is not all about you. He had a plan for this, and I had no idea what the plan was, and I'm glad I didn't, because I would have changed it if I knew what his plan was. I certainly didn't want to go through this. The pain was incredible, and more the psychological pain of the fear. I thought I was going to lose my practice if I can't work again. They were talking I was going to be in the hospital for 6 months and a nursing home for 2 years. And as a veterinarian, you can't be away from your practice for 2.5 years and expect it to be there when you get back. So I figured I was going to lose it. So there was fear, there was pain, there was a lot of anger at me being in this position. I was in hell, and I didn't do anything to get myself there. I was put there by somebody else. Now it was just my choice of whether or not I was going to stay there.
What was your first sight of victory? When was that moment that you said, you know what, I'm going to make it through this?
Right. It took a while. I was so banged up that they didn't know that I was going to survive, and how long I was going to survive, and how good I was going to be when I was done. So it took a long time. And there was a day when I finally had to get rid of the anger. I had to get rid of the anger and get rid of the hate. And actually, the way I got through that, I had been trying on my own for quite a while with no success. I had tried to put it in the past. Well, I have 2 broken arms, 2 broken legs, and I'm stuck on my back like a turtle. I'm not going to forget about this anytime soon, so that wasn't going to work. Tried to say maybe this wasn't this guy's fault. Well, he's an 8-time drunk driver who blew a .21 3 hours after he hit us. He's driving around at 1 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon. Yeah, it was his fault, so I can't just say that. I had to get past that and get past the anger of that. And the way I actually did, I was watching TV in my bed one day, and as many of you know the story, there was an Amish shooting in Lancaster, Pennsylvania about that time. And I remember the mother of one of the victims coming on, and the reporter asked her, how are you dealing with this man what do you think about the man who shot your child? As many people know, that there were 5 children who were shot by this man who went into this Amish school. And I remember to this day, the mother stopped her and said, "We've forgiven him." And the reporter looked at her with a bit of shock and said, "How did you forgive him? He's shot your child." And she said very simply, "We've forgiven him because that's what Jesus teaches us to do. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us." And it was like she was standing right next to the bed, next to me. And I knew right at that point, okay, that's what I need to do to get out of this hell. This is what I have to do. And I can't wait for him to deserve it. I can't wait for him to ask for it. I couldn't speak with him. We're going to court, so I can't talk with him anyway. He may not deserve forgiveness. He may not ask for forgiveness. But if I wanted to get out of hell, I had to forgive him and leave that anger behind.
Wow. That has to resonate with so many of our viewers right now that are listening, because there are situations and things that happen in our lives, and they're unexpected, and they come up from around the corner, or they hit us head on, and our natural reaction is to be angry. I talked to this one kid, he said, "I'm so angry at my dad."
Yep.
And they have this anger, and you're just saying, forgive, like Christ forgave us. So you have the ability to forgive.
Well, and I had a perfect role model for how not to handle this. So the man that hit us, 8-time drunk driver, alcoholic, well, he was sexually abused as a child. He had a ton of anger from that. And you can see from the time he was sexually abused, he started drinking, became an alcoholic, and 20 years later is practically wiping out a family of 5.
Wow.
So I knew exactly how not to do it.
Yeah.
And I knew I didn't want to do it like he did it. So I had to do something different. And that Amish mother telling me very simply, You just have to follow what Jesus tells you to do.
Yes.
You've said this prayer since you were 4 years old. Now listen to it and follow it. And when I did that, I could leave that anger and hate behind. And I always say, I don't think hell has any walls around it. I don't think heaven has any walls. We pick and choose when we want to leave it. The only problem is we can't take those things with us. We can't take anger and hate out of hell.
Yes.
You have to leave them behind if you want to leave.
That's right. And you went through hell to get to heaven. And one of the major ways you did that was you forgave.
Yeah.
So we encourage you to forgive, let it go. Let that love of God and Christ's forgiveness that you receive, let it flow through you to that person or that situation. Thank you so much, Dr. Scott. We will hear more from you and your story. All right, Sydney and I are back to hear more from Scot Hodkiewicz, going through hell to get to heaven. Let's talk about your road to recovery and what that looked like.
Well, the recovery was long. And with all the breaks and fractures I had and with all the trauma that I had had, it was a long road to recovery and very painful road to recovery. Physical therapy, when you're that beat up, is going to be very hard. As part of that, I was on Oxycontin for a long time, 8 months. And anybody that's on Oxycontin for that long is going to be addicted to it. And so I had to deal with the addiction part of things too. I had to be on that medicine. Tylenol and ibuprofen is not going to cut it when you're that beat up. And that kind of pain will sap your strength and sap your will in no time. So I had to be on it. The problem with it is I thought I wouldn't get addicted to it. I thought I was special. And again, that's the arrogance coming out. And God had to show me, you're no different than anybody else. I wasn't any different than the drunk driver that hit us that was addicted to alcohol. All the addictions are the same. And so I became addicted to oxycodone and had to deal with that part of things also.
Scott, when did you realize that, you know what, this addiction really has a stronghold on me and it is out of control?
Well, you know, I had gone, as you get on the oxycodone, you develop a tolerance, and so my levels had gone up and up and up and up. Anybody who's been on that, the normal dose is about 5 milligrams 3 times a day maybe. I was on 80 3 times a day at my high point.
Oh, wow.
I think what really turned me around was as I was healing and was on a lower dose at that point, but still on it, I started to drive. And here I am, almost killed by a drunk driver because of his addiction. And here I am driving with oxycodone in my system thinking I'm better than he is. I knew that if I kept doing this, I would be the one hitting the family of 5 and wiping them out. I knew at that point I had to stop it. Plus, I'm a veterinarian. I can order these drugs legally. I knew if I was going to get back to work again, I couldn't have an addiction. I would be ordering the drugs and using them too much. So at that point, I had to start coming off of them. I tried cold turkey. That doesn't work. Your brain is now adapted to these chemicals, and I had to come off of them slowly. And with a lot of prayer and a lot of support and a lot of help, I started to wean on down. The fact was I was using them a lot for emotional support then. And as I got rid of the anger and as I got rid of the hate and I dealt with all that, then it became easier to come off of those drugs because I didn't need them anymore.
One thing I keep hearing from you is you're like real with yourself. You know, like, I've got anger and I've got a problem, and if I don't forgive, this is going to hurt people. You know, I've got an addiction, and I've got to be real with where I'm at so then I can get help and move forward. How did you find Christ, and what was your relationship like with the Lord as you're going through this journey?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, I wasn't very spiritual to start with, so I didn't have much of a relationship with God. God showed himself to me slowly. I think if he would have thrown a burning bush in my hospital room, I would have said, well, I'm hallucinating again, and I would have not believed it. So instead, he opened the door slowly with me. He showed me the angels that were in my life that were helping me along. And then I started to hear that voice inside my head that said, no, you need to go this direction, not that. And in the past, I put that off as just the voice and just me thinking. But as I started to realize that and started to say, no, that can't be God, and started to say, well, maybe that is God. once I started hearing that voice, now you hear it all the time,
Yeah.
and I trust it. Once you know that that's God talking in your head,
Yeah.
you learn to trust his advice.
Yeah.
And Scott, I just really appreciate your vulnerability of opening up and sharing something like that, especially with addiction and the trauma and the things that you go through, because here in this area, there's such a stronghold with, painkillers and opioid addiction and all of those things. What would you say to somebody who's just like you? You seem like successful, you're a doctor, but they're struggling with addiction because sometimes they want to mask it. What would you say to that person to say, this is what you really need to do and why you need to do to be set free?
I think when I was trying to leave hell, the one thing I realized is that there's no chemical that's going to allow me to leave hell behind. There's nothing, no addiction that I can take out of hell. If I want to get out of hell, I have to leave those addictions behind. And like you said earlier in the program, strong mind. If your mind is clouded with these chemicals or with whatever addiction you're dealing with, you're going to be stuck in hell, and that's what's going to be keeping you there. And don't expect to leave it. I thought I was special. I thought that the addiction wasn't going to get a hold of me. We're all wired the same. We all have the same chemicals, and my chemicals were altered in my brain just like everybody else's. It's a matter of getting off of that and realizing that I'm hurting myself by doing this and hurting the people around me. This addiction was going to destroy me, just like it destroyed the person who hit us. I had a perfect example in that. This is the road you're on. If you're going to keep going down that road, this is where you're going to end up. And I didn't want to be on that road anymore.
What does life look like now for you?
It's amazing that once you go through something like this and learn how to forgive and learn how to trust in God's plan, you just trust it. And so forgiving now is easy. It's second nature. And as things come up in life that are hurtful and that you should be angry about, once you learn how to forgive, and I forgave a major thing here. I forgave a major problem.
Yep.
So now forgiving something seems fairly minor. I've been through worse. And the one nice thing of coming out of hell and finding heaven on the other side is that you've been through hell already once. If you have to go through it again, you know how to get out. So life becomes a little bit easier. My kids are now grown up. They're wonderful, well-adjusted, beautiful people. And I think this crash had a lot of that effect on them. My kids are just a joy in my life. My wife is amazing how she has dealt with this. And the twists and turns of our life, really I never could have seen coming. This crash ended up saving us. I never thought when I was laying in that hospital bed that I'd be able to say down the road that this is the best thing that could have happened to us and that it wouldn't change a minute of it. But this is trusting in God's plan, not mine. If I would have known what was coming down the road, I would have changed it and things wouldn't have worked out near as well as they have. Wow. So it was a blessing to get into this crash.
Thank you so much, Scott, for just sharing and opening up about, just your transformation of how you had to go through hell to get, to heaven here on earth.